So here we are with another episode of Words with Friends. And today I have Scott McKain, like the real Scott McKain. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Phil, thanks. We are here at Moving Day in my office. Sorry things are so messy behind me, and I'm not very formal here today, but it's a great day. Any day to spend time with you is a great day. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I recently interviewed Leslie M on the word authenticity, and we were talking about how showing up in a way that's real. And that's what I love about the background that you have there right now is this is real. This is Scott in his real life making stuff happen. Scott, word we're going to be talking about today is the word service. Why do you think I've picked you, of all people, to discuss the word service?
Well, I appreciate that you thought of me for that, because there are so many dimensions to that word. You know, there is the service that employees provide to their customers. There is the service that leaders deliver to their teams. There is the attitude of service. There is the execution of service. There are so many applications for that word, and it's such a deep and profound word. And I'm grateful that you thought of me for that, because it's a very important word to me, and I know to you as well, Phil.
Yeah, completely. And in picking that word, it made me think about a great Jim Rohn quote, which is all to do with the road to greatness. And I think it's service to many is the key to greatness, was how that was put about. And I think that we live in a world where we get confused sometimes by what service really is. So through your eyes and with your experience, what does the word service mean to you?
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because it seems that many times when we think of service, we think of putting ourselves below someone, that the service of others puts them on a pedestal, or somehow in an almost subliminal way suggests that they are more important than we. And I think true service is something that is delivered in more of a peer-to-peer type relationship. Just because I am serving you does not mean that I perceive that I am inferior to you. And I think one of the things that we have to do about the term service is to imply or to give greater emphasis to the aspect of the dignity of service and the aspect of what a great tradition that it creates. And your Jim Rohn quote is spot on. The other one that you hear so much is when the late Zig Ziglar used to say, you can get anything in life you want if you help enough other people get everything they want.
Yeah.
And you can't do that without serving them. And so I think those quotes are very parallel in terms of implying about the importance and the dignity and the critical nature of service.
Yeah, and to echo that point as well is when I interviewed our mutual friend Bob Berg, Bob talked about how instead of saying the words "no problem" after somebody has done something for you, the echo of the words "my pleasure" that leads towards the fact that service is something that should be given from a position of joy, or from a position of certainly peer-to-peer, more so than anything that is subservient. So why is it that when something is subservient, it is still a derivative of the word service?
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. I love that. You bet. And also, when we hear about servant leadership, sometimes I think we misunderstand what that means, because the traditional application of servant is, one who is below, one who is beneath. And I think nothing could be further from the truth in terms of how it really needs to be applied and how it really needs to be executed.
I speak with a lot of companies, and I try to ask them, what is it that makes them different? We have a web development company as part of the portfolio of businesses that I own. And often we're trying to get companies to say, what is it that makes you different? And the common echo I get back is, well, it's our service. Period. Right? That's the end of conversation. It's our service. So the thing that makes almost every business in the land different is their service. And they all say the same thing. So much so that some people pride themselves on their service. I mean, I imagine going to that like it's a party. This is our priding ourselves on our service kind of party. How does a business go about actually doing something that is demonstrably different, or a way of them articulating what it is within their service?
You reminded me of something, the project that we did, Phil, a while back. One of the major financial wirehouses, institutions, asked us to find out, what separated their A+ performers from their A- performers. which I thought was very perceptive, because it's easier to take an A- and move them to an A+ than it is to take a C+ to make them an A, right? And so one of the major differentiating factors was that the A- producer talked about what made them different was client service. Now, the funny part was 80% of them said that's what made them different. If 80% are saying the same thing, I'm no math major. If 80% of us are saying the same thing, it probably does not make us different. And the thing we noticed about the A+ performer was they put meat on the bones. In other words, they didn't say our client service made us different. What they said is the way that we do this to serve you makes us unique in the marketplace. And so they would be very precise and very specific about a particular activity that they were doing. For example, sponsoring $1 million roundtables or CEO roundtables. Part of the way that they served one another was to connect other CEOs that they were the financial advisor for with others at that same level and create a roundtable. Had nothing to do with investing, had everything to do with helping their clients and serving one another. And so I really learned a lot from that study that we did, because it really taught me that those that perform at the highest level don't just say we serve, but they find unique ways to do it, and they describe that uniqueness, that distinction, very precisely and very accurately.
I can't leave that hanging there without diving further. You gave one example there of where companies have done things to demonstrate a level of service. Through your experience, you must have catalogs and dozens of examples of where people have done the same. So give us maybe some of the lesser known examples where people have put meat on the bones, to use your words.
Sure. Educational programs for their children on money management, because they identified that one of the unique things about many of the folks of affluence is that if the affluence wasn't inherited, the lives of the children were dramatically different than the lives of the parents when they were at that same age. In other words, they didn't grow up with wealth and affluence; they earned it in the progress of their lifetime. And so, one of the major concerns that they were having is, how do I teach my kids humility, and how do I teach them the value of a dollar? How do I teach them respect for money when they've grown up with such a significantly greater amount of affluence than what I grew up with? And so for these financial advisors to sponsor programs for these young people to help teach them that, to help the parents transmit that, was extraordinary. Another thing was, and this will appeal to your heart as well as mine, was a book of the month club. In other words, they have reading groups of these very affluent leaders, and the financial advisor would provide each of them with a particular book every month. And the assignment was to read the book. They would get together, they would discuss the book. And that's part of what I found so compelling about all this, is as they were delineating these activities, it wasn't that we're going to beat the market by 2%. It was the kinds of things that we could do to serve you in a well-rounded way, not just specifically to our particular industry or field of endeavor. And that's I tell the story of this cab driver in Jacksonville, Florida. It's been one of my keynote stories, one of my signature stories for many, many years. And
you're still using that?
Taxi Terry, yeah, I still am. Phil, it's funny. I started not telling it in my speeches, figuring everybody was tired of hearing it, and people would come up going, I told all my friends you were going to tell this story. I felt like the singer that doesn't perform the hit song,
Yeah, no, I get you, man. I get you.
You know what I'm saying? So people kept saying, you got to keep telling that, and because even if we've heard it, we want to hear it again, which is awfully nice. But anyway, one of the things that he did was he had an iPhone mounted on a bracket on his dash that was set to weather.com for Jacksonville. Now, look, I know I can look the weather up on my own phone. But the thing that I didn't anticipate when I first rode with him was how many of the people that get in his cab at the airport are there for a golf trip. And so he provided something that was unexpected, that was of service to his customers, but it also would begin a conversation. Here's what the weather's going to be while you're here, and they could talk about the weather. And then the more that you could stimulate conversation, the more ways that he could uncover to be of service. And as opposed to get in the cab, shut up, get there. And
so this is somebody who deliberately made a weather conversation purposeful and useful.
Oh, exactly right.
Yeah.
And because part of the enjoyment of his customers after they got out of his cab had nothing to do with the cab, right? But after they got out of the cab, part of their enjoyment of the trip was weather dependent. You know, what's it going to be like when we're out there golfing? What's it going to be like? And so he could have a conversation, which also many times led to how are you getting to the golf course? Right? I can come by and pick you up. You know, rather than you just step out of the hotel and take whatever taxi's sitting there. Now you've had a conversation. Now we know you're playing golf. Now we know, you know, so being of service and providing something to the customer that was unexpected. You know, I don't depend on cab drivers for meteorological information, but yet it was a nice thing for them to provide. And it also led to more business for him. And you know.
So the lesson in that, though, is initiative, right? That's kind of what it is. It's thinking 1, 2, or 3 steps ahead of what might be in the requirement, the thought, the need, and maybe helping understand what somebody else needs before they even need it themselves.
Yeah, especially that. And what helps your customer eventually helps you.
Right.
It might not be so readily apparent. And I think that's where a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations fall short, is they don't do exactly what you said, which is take it 2 or 3 steps out. You know, it's not checkers with the next move. It's more of a chess game of, if I do this, how can I, you know, it's thinking several moves out. And most of us don't do that. It's that, wow, if we do this, what's our immediate return without, see, to me, the true attitude of service is not that if I do this, I'm going to get an immediate return. Okay. If I say this, then you're going to do more business with me. It is, how do I help you so that we establish a rapport, a relationship, something beyond mere transaction. Service is what helps us transcend transaction.
Okay.
And that's the fundamental key, it seems to me, for so many organizations today.
In a retail environment, what you often see is a customer service department or a service desk in some way, which is a polite way, through my experience, of presenting the complaints department.
Exactly.
Why do you think that this is what we transpose service to actually be able to mean, is the place you go to complain?
Great question. I think part of it is tradition. In the era previous, where customer service and the customer experience was not as viewed as critical as it is today, it was just going to be to handle complaints, just as many times salespeople are taught to handle objections. I think many times too that, you know, I have yet to pick up the phone and call our energy provider of electricity and say, hey, the lights are on. Thanks.
yeah. Again.
Thank you. I get
the 6 for 6 days on the bounce.
Yeah. You know, I mean, and so typically I think what we see is that many of the times that we do connect, you know, when we do things right, customers don't tell us. When we do things wrong, customers tend to complain. And so dealing with that becomes more important. But yet I also think, you know, part of it is the expectation phenomenon as well. You know, it's the Pygmalion effect. If we anticipate that most of our conversations are going to be complaints, you know, guess what we get, and guess what our antenna is up to receive. And therefore that's what we prepare for. And because we've anticipated it, that's what we see and what we get.
We live in a world right now where businesses are focusing on what can they do to market more effectively. We have the world of social media blowing up and be a permanent conversation as to how can we more effectively market through social media. And then quite commonly, the things that I see that create either astronomical growth or destructive failure within an organization is a moment that was service inspired within an organization that either caused something to blow up or to disappear. Yet many organizations are focusing on the communication channel as opposed to the thing that actually could happen that causes that communication channel to become useful or lack in service. Am I kind of coming at that from a weird angle? Is that something you see in your world too? Is there anything that Scott's got to talk into that point?
Gosh, that's such a brilliant observation. I mean, I see so many organizations, unfortunately, that seem to focus, as you said, on what's the next tweet going to be, and how many followers do we have, as opposed to creating the kind of experience that would generate customers tweeting about them. Right? Yeah. I mean, to me, the greatest social media, it's the oldest saying in the world, but the best marketing is word of mouth advertising, word of mouth marketing. But yet what we tend to do is to think about how we're going to get that next tweet out there and how we're going to keep fogging stuff out to social media, as opposed to doing what seems to me to be the more profound and more important, impactful step, which is to say, how do we create these experiences that are so compelling our customers want to tweet about us? Okay. They want to talk about us on Yelp. They want to do those important kind of things that are infinitely more, when I'm looking for a dentist here in our new home area, and the first place I go is Yelp. And there is one dentist who is right around the corner, and his reviews are absolutely fantastic. They are over the moon. But here's the amazing thing. It's not on his skill as a dentist. It's not that the filling was perfect. It was that the office is so friendly. It is that he took the time to explain every procedure to me. And so, my wife is calling, making us appointments today, simply because customers, he created such a compelling experience as a dentist. His patients wanted to convey this. Yeah. That's what we should be doing.
So there's a dentist example. You said that what businesses should be doing is to spend more time thinking about how they can create moments or experiences that are worth then tweeting about, sharing about, etc. I got to ask you the question is, how do businesses spend more time doing things that create moments that are worth tweeting about or sharing?
Well, I certainly wouldn't presume to tell them exactly what to say.
Yeah, well played, well played.
However, may I suggest, I think one of the three words saying that many businesses need to be asking is, and then what? I mean, we hear so much about the customer journey. I was on a program the other day and they were talking about the customer journey, but at no point during that conversation did they ever say, and then what? Right? I mean, and to me, the great organizations in terms of delivering that are constantly asking that question. The customer walks in our enterprise, and then what? The customer calls us on the phone, and then what? And being very precise and very specific. And Phil, I've told you this privately, so I hope you don't mind me saying it on this, is that one of the things that really inspires me about your work and your books is it is very precise and very thoughtful in terms of, and then what? In other words, when the customer says this or the prospect says that, specifically, what do we say? What do we do? And I hear all this about the customer journey, and it's all strategy and no tactics. Strategy is critical, but if we don't have a recent study by the Retail Marketing Institute said that 70% of frontline employees cannot answer this question. Why am I as a customer better off to do business with you as opposed to the competition? Now, if 70% of our own employees can't tell a customer why they're better off to buy from the place signing their paychecks than the competition, we haven't told and helped our internal customers, our employees, know exactly what to say.
Thanks for the then echo back towards exactly what to say. Even that one maybe not.
I believe in what you do, and I think it's compelling and powerful and really, really important.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. And that wasn't where I was going with it. We must have seen the other side of this coin as well, where what's happened is businesses have done something where the intention has been to deliver service, yet they've just categorically failed. And they believed what they was doing was under the viewpoint of saying this is good service, yet the receiving end or the recipient of that service would argue to believe that would be different. You must have seen stuff like that.
Yeah, I believe there are three levels at which any business interacts with its customers. And what most businesses have overlooked is that they're progressive.
Right.
And so instead of lumping it all together as service or experience, and we tend to use those terms interchangeably, and they're not. Yeah. And so the three levels, I believe, are number one, processing. Processing consists of the elements of the transaction, whether we're talking about product or service, B2B or B2C. What are the elements that are non-negotiable? What are the elements we have to get right every single time? Because if we don't, nothing else matters. If United Airlines said we don't crash often, that's a compelling reason to fly them, right? I mean, that's something they have to get right every time. If they don't get that right every time, nothing else matters. For the flight to leave reasonably on time, I'll make exceptions if there's weather, things outside of their control, but they got to leave reasonably on time. The bag has to arrive at the same destination I do. There are a list of things that we can say are the non-negotiables. Okay, so once they get that right, now we move to service. Service to me, in terms of business, are those things that we can do to make dealing with us more palatable, more efficient, more friendly. And so when the flight attendant, gives me a cup of coffee and sincerely asks how my day is going, that's great. That to me is customer service. Now, if the plane is crashing in the ocean, I don't care how hot the coffee is, right? I mean,
right.
So service only has traction once we've taken care of level 1, which is processing. Now, level 3 to me is the experience, which adds personalization and emotion. So when I feel that you're doing it for me, not just for the masses, but when you've made some kind of personal connection, and along with that, you've created some type of emotional connectivity, to me, that's where loyalty is created. That is where greater business is created. And here's the reason why. Why would I be loyal to something towards which I have no feeling? If I have no feeling, there's no real reason for me to be loyal, which is why, and I've heard you say this, if all you are is a price play, then customers aren't loyal to you, they're loyal to your price. Somebody lowers the price and goes, so that's why works that way. But now if you've given me some kind of emotional and compelling reason for us to be connected, the deeper the connectivity, then the greater the loyalty. So I think part of what happens in terms of what you were identifying with the problem is that they haven't taken care of level 1. They don't have the processing right. And so now they're trying to teach service and service techniques and a service attitude. But, if FedEx says it's going to be here by 10:30, if their delivery guy is smiling when he delivers it at 1 o'clock, that service with a smile really just kind of infuriates me. I don't want you to be smiling when you're late. I want you to be apologizing when you're late.
Yeah.
So I think it is not understanding that, that pyramid, those 3 levels, and not understanding that if you don't take care of level 1, level 2 doesn't help me very much.
I hear you. What's your view on automation and artificial intelligence and the role that plays in servicing consumers?
I think transparency is going to be the key moving forward. That was part of what, we've all seen the video of Google making the appointment at the hair salon. And the thing that strikes me is they didn't show the 9,000 ones that failed,
right?
In all likelihood. I think the key, it's going to be interesting as it progresses, but my knee-jerk gut level reaction is that the folks that will utilize it best are the folks that are very transparent about its utilization.
Right. And by which you mean they're saying, hey, I'm a robot and this is what I'm doing and I'm here to be able to help and support you. Okay.
I'm here to quickly serve you. But my Lord, how many times do you call someplace and you just go representative, to help me gather more, and none of the options fit.
Right.
So it's God forbid we have more of that. And, I hope it gets smarter. I hope it gets better, but we'll see.
We also live in a world though right now where the romantic in me listens to everything you're saying about, deliver great service, get level 1 right, get level 2 right, get level 3 right. And then, what you enter into is loyalty and all those beautiful sweet spots. And then we see examples in today's modern world where there are heavyweight organizations that receive high levels of loyalty through not delivering excellent customer service, through largely being convenient or having tied up through almost monopoly the ability to be able to corner that business. We've seen examples of it where, United Airlines that blew up as being able to be awful at customer service, yet 3 weeks later, they're still in business in the same way they were previously and lost a grand total of 0 customers. Uber are in the press for having bad service towards their employees. 3 weeks later, they're reporting record growth. I've tried to deal with some of the major organizations, say, for example, like Amazon, with the purpose of being able to deal with a service issue I have as a consumer within them as a business. And I don't get the level of service that I would expect as being reasonable from my local corner bakery. Mm-hmm. So the world is different and the world is changing. Why is it that these heavyweights can create role models and get away with things that aren't necessarily to your version of what good service would be?
That's a very complex question. And my very simplistic answer is twofold. Number one is we are learning that there are an extraordinary number of us who are customers who are defining service in terms of convenience.
Okay.
So if they drop it off at my door, that is my definition of service. And so we have to understand that service, I own the federally registered trademark on the term ultimate customer experience. And part of what I say with that is that it's a different experience based upon the individual customers. So for you and I, it might be this emotional connectivity. For others, it might be it's quick and it's easy.
And I didn't have to talk to a person. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But the second aspect of that is, I think it also, I think we fail to really comprehend how much it illuminates what a horrible job so many other competitors have done in establishing an experience that is so compelling that we choose it over convenience. And that is something that we tend to overlook. I mean, if I can't create a more compelling experience for you than going online and clicking, then I don't deserve your.
It's a really fair point.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, Phil, I mean, if they could put a computer on stage and have an AI voice deliver content instead of having you or I come to the meeting, if we can't create a more compelling experience than that, then we don't deserve the business.
Well, if I got an AI voice to do your voice in my place,
if I could have your accent, I mean, that's settled.
Okay, let's segue in another direction. There's a belief that we know that we have to be in service to others in order to be able to achieve greatness. Yet the majority of people that I bump into looking to progress their careers in some way have a me or a self-centered approach to what they want to be able to achieve. So it's all about achieving my goals, my ambition, being my true self, etc. Where do we think that changed in the masses? Because there was a period of time where people knew that their success was dependent upon the number of people they helped. And now what we're seeing, and I don't see this as a generational or an age dependent thing, I see a of this moment in time type of thing, is that there's a level of entitlement and that other people should be able to dance around my needs and my goals. Do you see where that pivot may well have happened?
You know, yeah, in a way. I was very fortunate. I was a national officer of a student organization my freshman and sophomore years of college. And I laid out of college those 2 years to serve for this organization. And part of our job was to meet with those corporations that help fund the student organization. So I had a chance at age 21 to sit in the boardroom at General Motors and have a private conversation with the chairman of GM.
Right.
His name was Thomas Murphy at that time. He was the chair at that time of General Motors. And a question that I asked him, and it was just the two of us, the question I asked him was, GM probably hired 5,000 people the week that you were hired. What enabled you to rise through the ranks to become the chairman and chief executive officer of one of the world's most distinctive organizations? And he said, it's funny. I figured out my first week that I could never get promoted unless there was somebody ready to take my place. If there was no one who could fill my job, how in the world could they move me to another one? So he said it was it was in my self-interest to develop a team that made me irrelevant because that made it easier for me to be promoted. He said, even though I was doing it for myself, what happened was when it got to the point that there were 2 or 3 of us that were going to be the next chairman, right? They had to pick between the 2 or 3. He said, I had built this reservoir of goodwill throughout everybody that I had touched in the organization that really wanted me to succeed because I had helped them get promoted and helped them succeed. So what was in a way my self-interest was also to their interest, and it helped me attain this position.
Love it.
I thought it really made an impact on me at 21 years old.
That's huge.
So to follow up on that, the difference was when Thomas Murphy went to work at General Motors, he probably imagined he would retire there. And I think because of, I don't mean this in a generational way. I just mean it in the changing face of business. For you to spend your career with one organization, many times is viewed as a detriment today. We see professionals who, quote unquote, stay too long with the company, and therefore we don't view building that reservoir of goodwill within the organization to our benefit, because we're going to be leaving anyway. I don't know how you solve that. I don't know how you make that go away, other than helping people understand that there is this intersection between organizational interest and self-interest and customer interest.
Yeah.
And that point that you can find where those intersect can be of great benefit to everyone.
So true. And there are some classic examples of that within the small business world, particularly within the service industries. Take, for example, hair care is, if a stylist leaves one salon and goes to another salon, 3 blocks up the street, 3 miles up the street, there's a good possibility a large number of people are going to move with the person, regardless of the name over the door, regardless of the pricing, regardless of other things. The thing that you just said that was super profound for me was that the success was created through creating a reservoir of goodwill. The assumption we made was that goodwill needs to be created within the same association, but the acceptance of truth right now is that people are always moving. Now, the fact that people are always moving, the overlap of these Venn diagrams of all these different people moving could be that one of the people that you created goodwill with in one company today is the same person that is looking at whether you're the individual for the promotion in an entirely different organization in an entirely different part of the world, or chances are through 1 to 2 to 3 generations of network, then those paths are going to cross in some way. So the thing in all of that possibly hasn't changed is if more of us went out to say, how do we create a reservoir of goodwill, then chances are that we'd be in service of our industry, or in service of our profession, or in service of a network, or in service of our country. Or that's the only thing that's changed, more so than in service of our company. Love that.
And it can still be in service of ourselves.
Well, that's the byproduct, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They're back to the Zig Ziglar quote. It's like,
and I love how you've said that too, because it is the residual benefit. It is the byproduct. It is not, it is not the fundamental primary goal, right?
Never is.
It's like the people who say my goal is to be rich, or my goal is to lose weight, or very seldom attain it because it's so nebulous. It's when I'm going to do this that wealth or happiness or fitness or whatever it might be become the residual benefit of your movement in that
right
way.
And no different to the world that I work in when I work with sales professionals or people that need to sell stuff more effectively. They're scared of asking for money. Yeah. And quite often what they think is the money is the goal, or they feel uncomfortable of asking for the money. Yet the money is only ever the silent applause of a job well done. Yes. It's not the reward itself. It says you did the thing you said you were going to do remarkably well. This is just a way of being able to keep a score as to how awesome you are.
And I love what you say too. It is the natural progression, right? I mean, if you've done everything else well, then that is just part of the natural progression and the growth of the relationship. Because if I don't spend money with you, how do I benefit from all these wonderful things that you have?
It's the and then what, to kind of come back around to what you were saying early on. Scott, we could talk on this stuff forever. You've been in the world of customer service and creating distinction and all the great things that you want to do. I've got a handful more questions. Sure. So I'm going to ask you one and then I'm going to ask you 3. But one is this giant segue between service and marketing and this huge blurred line between the two. Do you see a blurred line or any line at all, or is there a difference between those two things?
Well, I sound like the typical author here, but I've just finished my new book that's coming out in October. And
you write
one
a book?
Of the things I'm trying to simplify for folks is called Iconic. And one of the things I'm trying to simplify for folks is is how do customers judge you? And at its most basic, it is the intersection between promise and performance.
Okay.
Now, you can go a whole lot deeper on that, between what do we promise as opposed to what does the customer perceives that the promise is, right? But the customer is always going to evaluate you based upon their perception of your promise, but it is that matrix of promise and performance. And part of where I see the disruption of those two, of service and marketing, is that marketing makes a promise that is not congruent with the level of performance of service. And when we see that incongruency as a customer, then the natural response is distrust.
Like flying the friendly skies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the worst thing that they could do, and United is a client, and you know, I say in the book, as I've said to them, and I have their permission, in fact, to say it, is the worst thing they could do right now is to buy, you know, $10 million worth of fly the friendly skies spots, because the performance is not congruent with the promise. And so what we have to do to really become iconic is to, you know, the truly iconic, those who have been able to sustain or regain iconic status are those that have absolutely become incredibly congruent with promise and performance. And that is where the disconnection is between marketing and service, is, as I said, when marketing promises something that service can't deliver with performance.
Got it. That requires a little further thought, but I like it. It means I'm probably gonna have to read this book that you wrote. Okay. Three more questions.
You're going to be getting a copy.
Three more questions. I promise you just three more questions. First question is if there was something you wanted to ask me on the world of service and that word that we've been talking about today, what might be on your mind that I could shed some insight into?
You know, there are so many things that I could ask, and I appreciate you asking that, but I'm just curious, what is the best service experience that you've ever encountered? The one that really pops and makes you go, this is, if you were going to say, I would define service as this experience, what's the first thing that
the first thing that jumps to my mind? I have such a plethora of very average service experiences that I'm sifting through at the minute to see if I can lift a good one.
Which, by the way, gets back to your earlier point about why we call it the complaint department.
Yeah,
because the averageness blends together, and we have those dissatisfiers that really emotionally are gut-wrenching that we recall. Sometimes the ones that are really extraordinary takes a little longer to come up with.
I think I can probably refer to something relatively recent. In our world of speaking, we travel a lot, and this was me receiving service from a client or the team in which the client had put into practice, more so than me receiving service as a customer. So the other way around. But what it meant that I was prepared to go on and do extra for the client as a result of this was huge. So they got way more value from me as a result. And it was the simple fact of they had arranged for car service for me from the airport from my flight. They'd done all the basics to a ridiculously high standard to be able to track the flight, to understand where the delays might have been. And the actual driver of the car had reached out to my personal assistant that said that I could see that Phil's flight's been significantly delayed. Do you think that he might want a certain something to eat or drink when he arrives, because many of the restaurants are going to be closed and it's going to be difficult to be able to get him something? Is there something I can have waiting for him in the car? Now, to have that foresight, in terms of what it changed for me, was incredible. Yeah. Not only had that driver done that, she'd also then reported back to the hotel that I was staying and said, I took the courtesy of letting the hotel know that you were going to be running late. Wow. And there's keys waiting for your arrival. And this is a car service. Yeah. None of that was in their job description of saying here was a level 1 thing, but they stepped to do those things. And that's probably the one that jumps front of mind more than anything here of just some little things.
I love that for many reasons, but one of which is it points out something about service that we haven't talked about and it's so overlooked. And that is we tend to think that we will provide service to our customers.
Yeah.
They provided service to you. I mean, it would have been so easy for them to say, hey, we're paying you for this gig. We're
figure it out.
We're giving you your extravagant, exorbitant fee. Get yourself here, and instead it was, service goes both directions. But look what happened. you're talking about it now. You want to be of greater service to that client. You give more of yourself because of the way they gave more to you. That's
huge.
That's a great story.
Yeah. And that's what it's about, right? It's creating stories that live past the moment.
Yeah.
2 more questions. If there was a conversation happening about Scott McKain that you weren't part of, that people were talking about you, and there was a word that they used to describe you, what do you wish or hope that word was, if there was one single word to describe Scott McKain?
It's what I modeled my business after, which is distinctive. The presentations that he delivers are unique and distinctive. I mentioned in the book, I lost my first wife to cancer, and when we were going through that, I was out of the business for a while as a caregiver. So I had to kind of relaunch my career, and part of how I did that was to call those that book us speakers bureaus, and one of the questions I said is, what do you say about me when you recommend me to your clients? And Phil, the number one example, and I was honored but terrified. The number one example was, oh, good speaker and a nice guy. Now I want to be a good speaker, and I choose to be a nice guy. But I can't imagine the vice president of sales for Ford saying, you know, at this year's meeting for a speaker, we need a really nice guy.
Yeah.
They're going to say, get me an expert on sales, or get me an expert on the customer experience, or get me an expert on how we stand out. And I was a good speaker and a nice guy, which is about as generic as it could possibly get.
That was priding yourself on your service. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I just started looking for ways. How can I make my speaking business stand out? Because I was a decent speaker that would talk about just about anything you wanted me to talk about. And months later, almost a year later, I had the blinding flash, the obvious, that if I'm having this much trouble learning how to stand out, why shouldn't I? There's got to be others that are in the same boat, right? So that's when I started really researching and studying about distinction. What did it take to really create distinction in the marketplace? And so I would hope there would be congruency between what my message is. You know, as Jeff Bezos says, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yep.
And so hopefully there would be congruency between the marketing that I do in terms of distinction and the message that people would say about me if I'm not there.
Nice. I like that. Final question is, what are you about? Where can people find out more about you? If they were looking for more, what might they find? Give me the rundown on Scott McKain so others know how awesome you are.
I jokingly asked a guy that one time, and he said, well, there's a grand jury looking into it.
Whoa.
Right. Scott McKain, and it's McKain. ScottMcKain.com is the website that tells you all about the speaking business and the books and all that kind of stuff. We have a website called DistinctionNation.com. And we have tons of free resources there. There's nothing there on there for you to buy if you wanted to. It's all of the free resources that we hope that we can provide in terms of how to create. There's an audio course on how to create personal distinction. There's all types of posts and podcasts and blogs and everything that you can download that provides that. Phil, one of the things I've always thought is, if I'm going to talk about the customer experience, if I'm going to talk about service, if I'm going to talk about standing out, I'd better walk the talk. And so we figured the best way that we can do that is to provide as many resources as we can to help people, because if you do that, then it comes back. It's trying to walk the talk of exactly what we've been talking about today. So that's at DistinctionNation.com. And either of those, the brand new book, Iconic, comes out first week of October, and we're really excited about that.
It looks great. I've seen the cover, and it's fantastic. It's beautiful.
Well, it all started with a client question. There was a client that had broken down the Create Distinction book, that had reading groups of everybody. They had really created distinction, and the CEO said, "What's next? What's beyond distinction?"
They said, "And now what?" That's what they said.
And now what? Right? And so that's where the book really started, was talking with them about, and they'd created distinction locally. They wanted to become iconic. And so the definition for me is, distinction is industry specific. In other words, we're distinctive within our group, within our industry. But iconic is, we are so good, we become an example that spreads beyond just our individual discipline.
Got it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Scott McKain, thank you for joining us on Words with Friends. Thank you for chatting about service. And I think you've been the most distinctive guest we've had so far. So thank you for that.
You're the man. Thank you.
Catch you soon, buddy.
See you soon.